Vacations are meant to be a respite, aren't they? And I desperately needed one. Life had been delivering blow after blow recently, what with those divorce papers still mocking me from the kitchen counter, and signed, and the company restructuring that had me clinging to my job by the skin of my teeth. So, I decided on Hawaii sun, sand, and absolutely no emails, just me trying to gather the scattered pieces of myself on some faraway shore where nobody knew my name. Locating the perfect Airbnb proved to be a challenge. Most places were either overpriced tourist magnets or downright depressing shacks posing as rustic getaways. Then I stumbled upon Ida 2-bedroom, 2-bath beachfront house for an absolute steal, only $100 a night. The listing boasted professional photos showcasing hardwood floors, an open-concept living room, and windows that promised endless vistas of the ocean. The reviews were few but positive, though none were particularly recent. Too good to pass up, I thought. Maybe the universe was finally cutting me some slack. The booking process was strangely swift. No back and forth with the host. Just an immediate confirmation and a set of check-in instructions. I should have realized then that something was amiss, but desperation has a way of clouding your judgment. I boarded my flight out of O'Hare on a Wednesday morning. The plane ride felt interminable, crying infants, a guy with a persistent cough, and turbulence that had me gripping the armrest until my knuckles turned white. By the time we touched down in paradise, I was running on fumes, fueled by nothing but airport coffee and the promise of peace and quiet. The rental car agency saddled me with a beat-up Civic that had clearly seen better days. The air conditioning wheezed more than it cooled, and something in the engine emitted an unsettling clicking sound. But it moved, and that was sufficient. The drive to the Airbnb started off innocently enough: typical tourist sites, beaches, palm trees, and sunburned visitors snapping selfies. But as I followed the GPS deeper into the island's interior, things began to shift. The roads became narrower, the pavement giving way to gravel in sections. The tropical foliage grew thicker, forming a verdant tunnel that seemed to swallow my car whole. The GPS signal flickered erratically, and for a terrifying moment, I thought I had lost it completely. But then it returned, the robotic voice guiding me down a winding path that didn't appear to have seen maintenance in years. "You have arrived at your destination," the GPS announced, and I switched off the engine. The house stood before me, and a knot formed in my stomach. Don't get me wrong, it looked exactly like the Fotosa quaint beach house with weathered blue siding, white trim, and a wraparound porch that likely offered breathtaking sunset views. But something felt off. The windows seemed to stare back at me, like eyes observing my every move. The wind rustled through the surrounding palms, creating whispers that sounded almost like words. I grabbed my bags from the trunk, trying to dismiss the creeping unease. The key was supposed to be hidden under a potted plant by the door, one of those fake rocks that fool absolutely nobody. I found it easily enough, though the rock felt strangely warm to the touch, warmer than it should have been, even under the Hawaiian sun. The lock turned with a click that reverberated in the unsettling silence. No birds singing, I noticed. Aren't tropical islands supposed to be teeming with bird calls? The door swung open with a creak that belonged in a horror movie, revealing a dimly lit interior that smelled of sea salt and something else, something older and mustier that I couldn't quite identify. I fumbled for the light switch, and yellowed bulbs flickered to life, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. I dropped my bags in what appeared to be the master bedroom, king-sized bed, and soot bathroom, and those promised ocean views through windows that could use a good cleaning. The bedsheets were crisp and clean, hospital corner tight, but something about their pristine whiteness felt out of place in this otherwise lived-in space. Exhausted from the journey, I decided to do a quick walkthrough before unpacking. The house was cozy enough that fireplace ID seen in the photos, which did seem strangely out of place in Hawaii, a kitchen with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances that looked like they belonged in a cooking show, and a dining room with a table set for 6, though I couldn't imagine 6 people comfortably fitting in this space. My throat was parched from the travel, so I headed to the kitchen for water. The fridge hummed quietly, too quietly, really, as if it were trying not to attract attention. When I opened it, the light inside flickered twice before settling into a steady glow. It was mostly empty, except for some condiments and a bottle of white wine with no label. That's when I noticed an envelope, yellowed with age, taped to the inside of the door. The edges were stained with something dark that I told myself was just water damage. My name, Steve, was written on it in elegant cursive, the kind they don't teach in schools anymore. I stared at it for a long moment, my hand hovering near but not quite touching it. In my line of work insurance, adjuster unexpected letters usually spell trouble. But this was vacation, this was supposed to be my escape. Finally, curiosity got the better of me. I peeled the envelope from the door, noting how the paper felt strange somehow, too thick, almost leathery. Inside was a folded piece of paper that looked newer than the envelope, though not by much. The paper crackled as I unfolded it, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet house. The handwriting was the same as on the envelope, precise, almost mechanical in its perfection. "Hello, Steve," it began, and something cold slithered down my spine. How long had this envelope been waiting for me? The letter continued, "Thank you for choosing to stay at this Airbnb for the week. I hope your stay is a good one, but first you must read the rules. Rule 1, we do not have a maid. If a tall woman in a maroon dress knocks on the front door, claiming to be the maid, do not open the door. 1A, if the woman returns the next day, hide, preferably in a room with a lock. Rule 2, never leave open food in the fridge for more than 2 days. Rule 3, if you wake up in the middle of the night and see a man in your kitchen, don't freak out. He will be gone by morning. Rule 4, don't go outside after the sun goes down. Rule 5, if you see a little kid in the pool, call the number on the fridge and inform them. They will send someone to handle it. Rule 6, if you walk up the stairs and see a little girl holding a teddy bear, go into the first door on your left, grab a toy from the box, place it in front of the girl, then go downstairs for 15 minutes. It will be safe afterward. 6A, if the girl doesn't leave, run. Rule 7, never go into the attic, even if you hear noises. The note ended with that neat signature, "Sincerely, the owner." Then I, Steve, read it 3 times, my heart rate picking up with each pass. This had to be a joke, right? Some local's idea of messing with tourists, or maybe the owner's quirky way of making stays memorable. But if it was meant to be funny, the punchline was lost on me. But I, Steve, could feel the regret settling in my stomach like a lead weight. The rational part of my brain, the part that dealt with insurance claims and mortgage payments, tried to make sense of it. Maybe it was a liability thing, some weird way of warning about local wildlife or trespassers. But another part of my brain, a more primitive part that remembered being afraid of the dark, whispered that something else was going on here. But I, Steve, pulled out my phone to call the owner, to demand an explanation or maybe just cancel my stay altogether. No signal, of course, as I, Steve, moved around the house, holding my phone up like some kind of digital divining rod, searching for even one bar of reception. Nothing. Just then, the doorbell rang. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet house, making me, Steve, jump so hard I dropped my phone. It clattered against the hardwood floor, the screen lighting up with the no service message that seemed to mock me now. Another ring, more insistent this time. Then I, Steve, approached the front door cautiously, my feet silent on the old floorboards, which was strange because they'd creaked under my weight earlier. The peephole was one of those old-fashioned brass ones, the kind that distorts everything into a fisheye view of reality. Through it, Steve, saw a tall woman in a maroon dress, exactly as the rules had described. Her face was hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat that looked like something from another era. She stood perfectly still, hands clasped in front of her, waiting. Then Steve, knocked again, 3 sharp raps that seemed to reverberate through my bones. "Hello, sir," she called out, her voice pleasant and professional, like a flight attendant's. "I'm the maid. I'm here to clean the house." Rule number 1 echoed in Steve's mind: do not open the door. There must be some mistake. Steve called back, trying to keep my voice steady. "I wasn't told about any maid service." She didn't respond immediately. The silence stretched out, broken only by the sound of Steve's own breathing and the distant crash of waves that suddenly seemed very far away. "Sir," she said finally, her voice different now, lower, rougher, like something trying to remember how to sound human. "I need to clean. The house needs cleaning. Let me in." The knocking resumed, but it wasn't the polite tapping from before. This was a pounding, relentless and rhythmic, like a heartbeat. The door shuddered in its frame with each impact, and Steve, stumbled backward, my heel catching on the rug. As Steve fell hard, the impact driving the air from my lungs. The pounding continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. As Steve lay there on the floor, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. The silence that followed was absolute. No wind, no waves, not even the hum of the refrigerator. Just nothing. After what felt like an eternity, Steve gathered the courage to look through the peephole again. The porch was empty. Steve spent the next hour pacing the house, double-checking every lock and window. My phone still showed no signal, and the house's Wi-Fi password from the welcome packet connected to nothing. Steve was effectively cut off from the outside world, trapped in this house with its strange rules and whatever had just pretended to be a maid. The logical thing would have been to leave, to get in that beat-up Civic and drive until Steve found civilization again. But something stopped me, Steve. Maybe pride, maybe curiosity, or maybe something else, something that had been waiting for me, Steve, since Steve first saw that Too Good to Be True listing. By late afternoon, the humidity had become unbearable. The house's air conditioning worked, but barely, pushing around warm air that seemed to stick to my skin. A swim started to sound good, too good to resist despite everything that had happened. The pool ID scene from my bedroom window beckoned, promising relief from both the heat and Steve's growing anxiety. Steve changed into swim trunks, grabbed a towel from the bathroom, noticing how it smelled faintly of mothball sand, headed out back. The pool was smaller than it had looked from above, kidney-shaped and surrounded by concrete that had seen better days. The water was clear, though invitingly blue in the late afternoon sun. Steve dipped a toe in perfect temperature. Before long, Steve was swimming laps, trying to wash away the memory of the woman in the maroon dress. The water felt good, normal, and for a few minutes, I could almost pretend this was just a regular vacation. That's when Steve saw him. He appeared without sound or warning, a little boy, maybe 7 or 8, sitting cross-legged at the edge of the pool. He wore red swim trunks and nothing else, his pale skin almost translucent in the sunlight. But it was his eyes that made my heart skip a beat. They were vacant, unfocused, like dusty marbles set into a doll's face. He stared at me or through me, his head tilted at an angle that looked wrong on a human neck. Steve froze in the water, my feet finding the bottom of the pool. Rule number 5 screamed in my head: if you see a little kid in the pool, call the number on the fridge. The boy's head tilted further than it should have been able to. Gauntle, his ear nearly touched his shoulder. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Steve bolted from the pool, water cascading off me as Steve, ran for the house. Steve, didn't bother with the towel, leaving wet footprints across the hardwood as Steve, sprinted to the kitchen. The phone number was there, on a yellow sticky note, the ink slightly faded but still legible. Steve's hands shook as Steve, dialed on the landline phone, wondering if it would even work. It did, connecting on the first ring. Hello? The voice was crisp, professional, as if they'd been waiting for my call. Yeah, hi, Steve stammered, water still dripping onto the floor. My name is Steve. I'm at the Airbnb. There's a kid by the pool. The silence that followed felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken knowledge. Then the voice returned, calm but commanding. Listen carefully. Lock all the doors and windows. Do not, under any circumstances, look outside. Someone will be there shortly. The line went dead. Steve ran through the house, checking every lock, drawing every curtain. As Steve passed the windows facing the pool, Steve fought the urge to look outside, but human nature is a powerful thing. At the last window, Steve couldn't help myself. Steve lifted the corner of the curtain just slightly. The boy was still there, but head moved. He now stood at the edge of the pool, his back to the house. Water dripped from his body, forming a perfect circle around his feet, despite the fact that he hadn't been in the pool. As if sensing my gaze, he began to turn. Steve dropped the curtain and backed away, my heart hammering in my chest. The doorbell rang. For a moment, panic seized me. Had the woman in maroon returned? But when Steve, checked the peephole, Steve saw two men in black suits, their faces expressionless. They didn't wait for me, Steve, to open the door, instead producing a key and letting themselves in. They moved with practiced efficiency, not speaking a word to me, Steve. One headed straight for the backyard, while the other stood guard at the door. Steve caught glimpses of equipment in their hands, things that looked military but somehow wrong, like technology from another time or place. Steve sat on the couch, my wet swim trunks soaking into the fabric, listening to sounds Steve couldn't identify coming from the backyard. Once, Steve heard what might have been a child's laugh, but it was cut off abruptly, replaced by a high-pitched whine that made my teeth ache. 2 hours passed before they returned inside. The one who had gone to the pool looked different somehow. His suit was dry but wrinkled in impossible ways, and a thin trickle of what looked like blood ran from his nose. "The safe now," he said, his voice flat and mechanical. Without another word, they left, the door clicking shut behind them. Steve waited until their car pulled away before looking out the window. The pool was still there, still blue, still inviting, but the water was completely still, unnaturally so, as if it had been frozen solid despite the Hawaiian heat. After the pool incident, Steve couldn't shake the feeling that the house was watching me. Every creak, every shadow, every reflection in the windows seemed loaded with meaning. The sun was starting to set, painting the walls in shades of orange and red that looked uncomfortably like dried blood. Steve needed to eat something, but the thought of cooking made my stomach turn. Steve hadn't brought any food in with me, and after the rules about the fridge, Steve wasn't sure Steve wanted to. Still, Steve had to check what supplies were available. Opening the kitchen cabinets revealed a strange assortment of items, canned goods with labels so faded Steve couldn't read them, boxes of crackers that looked new but had expiration dates from 3 years ago, and a single box of cereal that rattled in a way cereal shouldn't. Steve closed the cabinets and decided hunger was better than whatever was in there. The sun had almost set now, and rule number 4 echoed in Steve's head: don't go outside after dark. Through the kitchen window, Steve could see the last rays of sunlight disappearing behind the trees. The darkness that followed seemed thicker than normal, almost liquid in its density. My Steve's phone still showed no signal, but the screen displayed 847p. Hours to go before morning. Steve decided to distract myself with TV, but when Steve turned it on, all channels showed static except only local station playing what looked like old cartoons. But something was off about them. The characters' movements were too jerky, their voices pitched slightly wrong, and their eyes seemed to follow me, Steve, around the room. Steve switched it off quickly. The house settled into night sounds, the typical creaks and groans of an old building, but also other noises. Steve couldn't quite identify something that might have been footsteps in the attic. Rule 7: never go into the attic. Even if you hear noises, a sound like fingernails on glass from somewhere upstairs, and occasionally very faintly what sounded like a child's laughter. Steve checked my watch. 9:23 p.m. The digital display flickered for a moment, showing what looked like strange symbols before returning to normal numbers. Steve decided to try sleeping. At least unconsciousness would make the time pass faster. Sleep didn't come easily. The bed was comfortable enough, but every time Steve started to drift off, some new sound would jerk me, Steve, back to awareness. The waves crashing outside should have been soothing, but their rhythm seemed wrong somehow, as if they were hitting the shore in Morse code. When Steve finally did fall asleep, it was the kind of shallow, uneasy rest that leaves you more tired than before. Steve dreamed of the boy from the pool, but in the dream, his head kept turning until it had spun completely around multiple times, like a grotesque corkscrew. Steve jolted awake at exactly 3:33 a.m. The numbers glowing an angry red on the bedside clock. Something had woken me, Steve. Some noise from downstairs. Steve lay there in the darkness, listening to my own heartbeat. When Steve heard it, the distinct sound of someone moving around in the kitchen. Rule number 3: if you wake up in the middle of the night and see a man in your kitchen, don't freak out. He will be gone by morning. Every instinct screamed at me, Steve, to stay in bed, to pull the covers over my head like a child and wait for dawn. But Steve had to know, had to see. Steve crept to the bedroom door, wincing at every tiny creak of the floorboards. The hallway was dark, but a faint light spilled up the stairs from the kitchen. Not electric light, but something softer, more organic, like bioluminescence. Step by careful step, as Steve made my way down the stairs, clinging to the wall to avoid the worst of the creaks. The glow got stronger as Steve approached the kitchen, casting everything in a pale, sickly blue. And there he was. He stood at the counter, his back to me, Steve, dressed in what looked like an old-fashioned suit. He was tall, too tall, his head nearly brushing the ceiling, and unnaturally thin. His movements were wrong, jerky, like a marionette, as he appeared to be preparing something on the counter. Don't freak out, he'll be gone by morning. Then Steve started to back away slowly, but Steve must have made some small noise because he stopped moving, just stopped, completely still like a photograph. Then very slowly his head began to turn. Then Steve ran back up the stairs, taking them two at a time, not caring about the noise now. Steve slammed the bedroom door and dove under the covers, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. Steve lay there, shaking, straining to hear any sound of footsteps following me. Nothing came. Eventually, Steve must have fallen asleep again because the next thing Steve knew, sunlight was streaming through the windows. Steve went downstairs cautiously, my throat dry, desperately needing water. The kitchen was empty, everything exactly as it had been the day before, except on the counter was a single teacup filled with something dark that steamed gently in the morning light. Next to it was a note in that same perfect handwriting: you weren't supposed to look. Steve spent the morning in a daze, The teacup on the counter, a constant reminder that this wasn't just my imagination running wild. I, Steve, poured its contents down the drain, watching the liquid leave an iridescent film that slowly crawled back up the drain pipe before disappearing. My phone still showed no signal, but the time kept changing in strange ways, sometimes jumping forward hours, sometimes backward, sometimes displaying impossible numbers like 2561. I'd given up on it as a reliable way to track time. The sun moved across the sky too quickly, or maybe my perception of time was warped by fear and lack of sleep. Either way, evening approached far sooner than it should have. I, Steve, needed to get supplies, food, water, maybe a weapon, but Rule 4 echoed in my mind, don't go outside after dark, and darkness was coming fast. Then I, Steve, decided to do one last check of the house before sunset, looking for anything I, Steve, might have missed that could help me, Steve, understand what was happening. That's when I, Steve, made my fatal mistake. I, Steve, went upstairs. She was there, standing at the end of the hallway, a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, with pigtails that hung at slightly different lengths. She clutched a teddy bear that looked wrong somehow, its proportions off, its button eyes reflecting light that didn't exist. But it was her eyes that froze me, Steve, in place, dark, bottomless pits that seemed to swallow the light around them. Rule 6 kicked in through my panic. If you walk up the stairs and see a little girl holding a teddy bear, go into the first door on your left, grab a toy from the box, place it in front of the girl, then go downstairs for 15 minutes. I, Steve, turned slowly, keeping the girl in my peripheral vision. The door was there, though I, Steve, could have sworn this hallway had been differently arranged before. My hand shook as I, Steve, reached for the knob. The room beyond was small, barely larger than a closet, and completely empty except for a cardboard box in the center. The box looked old, water-stained, and soft at the corners. Inside were toys, dozens of them, all looking decades old and slightly wrong. A doll with too many fingers, a toy car with windows that seemed to show actual darkness inside, a wooden train that felt warm to the touch like it had a fever. I, Steve, grabbed the first thing my hand touched, a small boat made of what felt like bone rather than wood. Rule 6 hadn't specified what kind of toy to use, and I, Steve, wasn't about to stay long enough to be picky. The girl hadn't moved when I, Steve, came out, but her head had turned to follow me, her neck bent at an impossible angle. I, Steve, placed the bone boat at her feet, trying not to look directly at her face, then backed away toward the stairs. Run, 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 my instincts screamed, but I, Steve, forced myself to walk down the stairs into the living room. I, Steve, collapsed onto the couch, my heart hammering in my chest, and looked at my watch. 15 minutes. I, Steve, just had to wait 15 minutes. The seconds crawled by with agonizing slowness. The house had gone utterly silent, no creaks, no waves, not even the hum of the refrigerator, just the sound of my own breathing and the tick, tick, tick of my watch, which seemed to be slowing to a halt. 14 minutes. The silence grew denser, a palpable pressure against my eardrums. 13 minutes. Was that a faint humming I heard coming from upstairs? 12 minutes. The light in the room seemed to be subtly dimming, even though the sun shouldn't have set just yet. 10 minutes. The humming had definitely gotten louder, and now it carried a warped, unsettling version of a lullaby that was almost familiar. 8 minutes. The temperature plummeted. I, Steve, could see my breath frosting the air. 5 minutes. The humming ceased abruptly, replaced by the distinct sound of something dragging heavily across the floor above. 3 minutes. Footsteps, small, light footsteps descending the stairs. 2 minutes. They paused at the bottom of the stairs. 1 minute. Something was breathing just behind me. Time up. I, Steve, looked up sharply from my watch. She was still there. Rule 6A, if the girl doesn't leave, run. I, Steve, bolted for the front door, my fingers fumbling desperately with the locks. Behind me, the girl emitted a sound, not a child's innocent laugh, but something far older, a sound like metal grinding harshly against bone. The door finally swung open, and I, Steve, burst out onto the porch, only to realize with a jolt of horror, the sun had already dipped below the horizon.